Do you think life is simpler as time evolves? For some, it can be more complicated when facing issues about health, estate plans, probate, long-term care, and more. That's why Attorney-CPA Joe Cordell hosts ElderTalk with TuckerAllen, providing intelligent answers for those thinking about their future. Here's Attorney-CPA Joe Cordell.
Welcome to another episode of ElderTalk. We have with us this week a guest who many of you have heard in the past. He certainly has been a guest on this show probably, Jill, 5 to 10 times?
Absolutely.
And he's very popular. Today's show is going to be about money. We found that as long as we talk about health and money, we're going to keep your attention. So these are crazy times. The market's doing crazy stuff. As of the day that we're recording this, the market, which today's the 3rd, is that right? Today
Yes.
on the 3rd, the market has just reached a new high, and it's pulling back a little bit. So we don't know now, is the market headed for a bear? Because it's had a significant pullback today, so we don't know if there's going to be a bear market ahead. So since we don't know the answers to these things, Jill, and I suspect that many of our listeners don't either, then we need to have an expert on the show to tell us about these things.
And who better to discuss this than Todd Oetken, financial advisor and certified financial planner for R.W. Baird. And we are so happy to have you back with us, Todd.
Thanks for having me, guys. I always enjoy it.
So where should we start? I guess let's start with this market today. I know we've been getting a run up over really the last, week or several weeks, and there's been talk of a correction. Today there's a little bit of a move down. So what do you think is happening right now?
You know, the market is the market. There's not a one answer to any of those questions. We've had just an amazing uptick in the market since March. I mean, we had that significant downturn because of the virus, which was self-imposed. And then we just had a continual, we'd get up a little bit and then go back, get up a little bit more. But boy, we hit a record high yesterday and everybody was ecstatic. And I would bet today people are just taking some money off the table and thinking, hey, maybe I ought to take some profits now because we've just had a great year so far. We've earned back everything that we lost plus some.
Yeah, so a lot of your clients I know are older, and their horizon's a little different for planning purposes. One thing I like about having you on as a guest is you're not simply a financial analyst, but instead you actually dispense financial advice to your clients. So you're a financial planner as well as an advisor. So when you're advising clients who are, say, 70 years old, for example, what do you suggest they do in a market that seems suspiciously frothy right now?
Well, we tell our clients, number one, when they get ready to retire, that we always keep between 1 and 2 years of expenses in cash. We used to say bonds or some type of money market, but those aren't paying anything anyway. So we usually cash. And that way, if the market does take a downturn, they can support their lifestyle through the cash component of their portfolio and allow the market to recover before they have to take money out of the market. Now, the danger of retiring today and having everything in the market, thinking, hey, I want to get as much return as possible, is when you have these big downturns, especially when you're investing at the top of the market. So you always want to make sure that you have an emergency fund in order to support your lifestyle during these times.
Well, you wonder if you're going to circle back and relive similar moments, perhaps 2006. We had a time when the market was frothy. It continued to go up a little bit. It went up some in 07. I guess 08 was when the big correction began. But a lot of people were, like you said, at that moment in time, they were looking at their savings, their 401k, their IRAs, and they were saying, wow, this is enough money for me to make a move. And we know many people did retire during those years. And then all of a sudden, the bottom comes out, and suddenly they're looking at 1/2 of the balance that they thought they had. And yet we know the market did recover. It by what date? By probably 2011, maybe?
2011, but if you would have had money off to the sidelines and could have reinvested it at a low market, then you could have made that back up fairly quickly. So, it's very important to have not only money in the market, but also have money outside where when there are opportunities you can reinvest, plus pay your expenses if you need to do that.
Todd, I remember when you were on the show back in November and you discussed something called the 4% rule. Can you review that for us?
Yeah, Joe, that's an industry average that we use that just says if you stick to about a 4% withdrawal rate, meaning that you take your entire balance, times that by 0.04, that gives you the amount of money we believe if you took out of your portfolio every year, you would still have money to support yourself later on down the road. Some people, and gosh, we've had clients that are taking 6 and 7%, and it seems to work out. But when you go a little bit heavier like that, you really have to depend on the market being positive for a long period of time.
Or count on dying sooner.
Or dying soon, exactly. If we knew, Joe, when we knew we were going to die, we could all plan a whole lot better. But we just don't know that, so we got to plan for the long haul.
And the nice thing about that formula, it's kind of cool, is that the way the math works is, since it's a percentage of what's in there, during hard times, you're taking out less, as you should during such a period of time. So you are having to adjust your lifestyle a little bit. But during good times, that 4% may be 10, 15, 20, 30% more, depending on how the market's doing at that time. So it does have you sort of riding the waves a little bit, but it always has you, one could argue, being reasonable. That you're taking out less when you should, and you're taking out more when you can.
Right. I agree with that 100%.
Todd, we're not going to hold it against you that in November you didn't predict a coronavirus and that the world would be upside down today, but we decided to have you on again anyway. But pull out that crystal ball, if you would, and we won't hold you to this. But incidentally, your predictions have been, putting aside the world-changing disaster of a coronavirus, your predictions have been pretty good about the market. But still, as you've been quick to say, no one really knows. So what do you anticipate as you look toward the end of the year and into next year? What are you projecting is likely to happen?
Yeah. Well, I'm an optimist, so you don't hold that against me. But I'm always looking at the glass is definitely half full. So here's what I see. Number one, you have some industries that have done amazing because of the coronavirus.
Yeah, it's schizophrenic almost how the market is.
Right.
Amazing. Amazon has created an entire different industry and really just recreated the retail business. And they were already in the process of doing that, but the stay-at-home thing just catapulted them into a whole different level. So they, businesses like that have excelled. But then you take a hotel. Our family owns several hotels, and we've laid off 700 people.
Oh, it's been a disaster.
Yeah, for the travel industry.
Right. So the travel industry, the hospitality industry, that's going to take maybe 2-3 years to recover, because not only do you have to get past today's coronavirus where people are still sheltering in place, wearing the face guards and can't travel. Once you get a vaccine, then you still have to get past the psyche of people that are still afraid, and they might be not having the big conventions they once had. So, I think our economy always has been where when one thing is bad, somebody's taking advantage of that and excels. So what do I see? I see that our economy is still going to chug along. People are going to still make money. I see that down the road, when we finally get this virus under control, that people are going to get back to spending money. The American people are so resilient. And I've started seeing that in Louisville already. Just the traffic alone has increased tremendously. People are getting back out to restaurants. And I see that it's going to get back to normal, and it'll be sooner than we think.
And it does look very likely, from what we are hearing, that there will be a vaccine by the end of the year.
Right. But, Jill, on that is that who takes it?
Yeah.
When the vaccine first comes out, are you want to be the first person to do it? I don't know the protocols on that. I'm sure the people who are more susceptible will be the ones that would probably want to do that.
Yeah, I think people in the healthcare field are going to be in line first.
So that'll be interesting. But again, even without that, I think the American people are going to get back to doing their daily things. And because anytime you walk out of the door, there's inherent risk that you're taking walking outside the door. And we just have to learn this is one of those inherent risks down the road.
Yeah, but this was one that really slapped us in the face earlier this year. We were not expecting, we were blindsided.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then I look at the industries that I think have been permanently changed. For example, I don't know to what extent these Zoom meetings are going to continue. I'll tell you, I don't care much for them. To me, it's a substitute, and I'm glad it's there, but it's not an adequate substitute, in my opinion, for being physically present. And don't you think this has been oversold a little bit? For example, in April or so, you're hearing companies say, this is so incredible that we're going to keep it forever. And there still are a few companies. I think it was Google that projected that their employees will not have to come back until they gave them a date of May of 2021. So there are some companies who are really vesting in this sort of approach. But I think that many are finding that initial euphoria or that enthusiasm that existed originally, they're finding out has its price. And I was just interviewing somebody yesterday for a position, and she was telling me that when we talked about the subject of working from home, she said that, I really don't like to work from home. It's just not for me, and I prefer to be in the office. I tried working from home, and she had been in a position where she did a lot of that, and she just didn't care for it. And I get it. There are a lot of people, including myself, who feel that way.
It's isolating.
Yeah, she mentioned that. She said she likes to be around other people. She likes to interact. She said she even likes to dress up. She says, I like to get up in the morning and clean up and go into an office. She said, I prefer that.
Because what happens when people do work at home? I think they tend to stay in their pajamas all day.
I would get depressed.
I would too.
Yeah. But I do think there have been a lot of changes, Todd, that will affect some industries forever. Now, surely hotels, your family, I know, invests heavily in hotels. So I think that, though, is going to bounce back easily. But I wonder whether office buildings will come back fully.
Well, there have been companies here in Louisville who have tried to do the stay-at-home before this COVID-19, and it didn't work very well for them, and they kind of came back to the office buildings. So, I think it's going to be a learning thing on the way down too, that, what's best? Do you stay at home? Because I tell you what, if you're working, as at least I am, I don't feel near as connected to my team as I did when we were in the office. But more importantly, people staying home, especially older people who are retired, the depression level that I have seen has just skyrocketed.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're not being able to get out. They're already lonely in the first place. And it is one of the worst things that I've seen happen to some of our clients is that portion of the mental portion of it.
If you're just tuning in, our special guest today is Todd Oetken, financial advisor and certified financial planner for R.W. Baird. Now, Todd, what advice specifically are you giving your clients during this stage of the pandemic?
A lot of it is more emotional advice than financial advice because their portfolios are well positioned and we haven't got a lot of scared clients yet. But most of it is emotional. And I tell you, a big issue with them being home is these scam artists. We've had 3 clients who've tried to give people $100,000, $98,000, $78,000 because they're home, they're answering these phones, and these guys are so daggone, I guess, friendly. I don't know what it is, but
charming, effective.
It's amazing. And they're just giving them this money unbelievable.
Well, they're catching somebody that's at home that's bored, especially we were just talking about it.
Lonely,
being
vulnerable.
At home. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would think that this would be a real opportunistic environment for people to prey on older, isolated people.
And I'd like to share this one with you guys because it just happened, and I had the lady in my office this morning, person who said they were from the U.S. U.S. Marshal Service called her and said they had found her information in a submerged car in some state, I don't remember what state, and that in order for them to get her credit restored and make sure it was her and all this. They had her take a $98,000 check to a little bank in a small town that was close to her. Now, she lives in Louisville, Kentucky, a small town close to her, and deposit into an individual's named account. And they even instructed her that if they ask you what it's for, you have to say that it's for a real estate purchase. And if you tell anybody about it, you're going to go to jail. And so the only reason we found out about it was because when they tried to cash the check, there wasn't enough cash in the account because it came out of her brokerage account.
Oh, thankfully.
Yes.
Oh, we would have had to sell stock to get the cash. So luckily we found it and we talked to her. She said, well, I can't tell you. I just need the money. I can't tell you because I'll go to jail. And we finally talked her into telling us, and we were able to stop that transaction. But the same lady has paid $3,000 to some poor guy that keeps calling her and says he has to clean up her internet account. It's been horrible. And that is happening all the time.
And you wonder, if these are the cases you catch, what about the ones that aren't caught? Meaning where the money goes through and the person may be embarrassed.
Exactly.
I mean, the personality you're describing, she'd probably be very embarrassed when she would have found out that it wasn't what it was. If she had ever found out, I guess maybe this would never be exposed. She would get a follow-up phone call saying everything's good now, and thank you. And
you hear of people in their 30s falling for these type of scams, too. It's not just older people. So you can imagine how much more embarrassed an older person would be.
Yeah. I can see how they're targets.
They all know that if someone calls them like that, they should call either a family member and run it past them, or their financial advisor, someone that they really trust, to make sure that it is a legitimate request.
So you've had this happen more than once.
We had another one who, again, it was $100,000 he'd given over time to this gentleman who kept saying that his internet account has been hacked and he needed to fix it. We weren't able to catch that one because the son actually caught that because that was coming out of his bank account. But finally, once we caught it, we were able to close down all the checking accounts that was coming out of. It was horrible.
So you prevented, though, these bad guys from accessing the money. Is that right?
Yes, we did. And that's one good thing about coming from, at least from our firm, is that we don't have online access where they can just, go on and transfer money from here to there. They have to actually talk to us before that happens.
Wow, that could have been disastrous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you think these people are living on a fixed amount of money, and when you take $50,000 or $100,000 off the top, using your 4% rule of thumb, imagine the impact on your revenues.
It's huge.
Your income.
Yeah, it's horrible.
And you never really hear of these con artists getting caught. You never know where they are. I mean, they could be in another country.
They often are.
Yeah.
They're in Russia and, Eastern European countries seem to stand out for this sort of thing.
And they sound so convincing, I guess. It's just horrible. So.
Well, and I think, too, what we were discussing earlier, people are isolated right now, especially senior citizens. They're lonely. Perfect target.
I agree.
So let's talk about your clients, your older clients who are not actually retired. I know that you have clients who, of course, are in a position where they made a decision perhaps some years ago that they had enough money to retire and they're trying to manage those funds carefully. But what about the people, though, who are in their 60s, 70s, some in their 80s who continue to work? That's a little bit of a different plan that you would suggest to them because there's still actually money coming in other than simply the income that's being generated by their savings. And that allows some flexibility in planning, right?
Oh, it really does. And if you get to them early, you can, and what I would always suggest is if you're even getting close to where you're thinking about retiring, get a professional financial plan done, because that looks at your entire financial outlook. Do you have enough, do you have too much debt? If you did retire, how much would you need? Could your portfolio weather a 50% drop in the market if you just retired today? So that those financial plans will answer those questions for you, and then you can prepare accordingly. We did have a lot of that just with Baird, because, we had some, when we got purchased, we were with Hilliard Lyons, got purchased with Baird. There were several people who, weren't going to continue with the firm. And, they got a little severance package. So by doing a financial plan, we could really help them and advise them if at 60 years old, could they go ahead and afford to retire or not.
And you can predict better when somebody is doing a plan at 60 versus when they're 40, meaning that you know more what lies ahead. You can predict longevity better, not perfectly, but better. So there's a lot more ability to plan accurately, perhaps as you age, the older you get. So I'm wondering, though, also, are there people who had retired who you're having to sit down with now, and you're perhaps discussing whether or not there's the possibility that they could generate some income? Do you have people who are suddenly considering getting a part-time job or finding some other way to bring more money in other than that from their savings?
Very much so. What we try to do is once they do retire, we try to do a comprehensive financial plan every 2 years for the first probably 7 or 8 years that they're retired, just to say, hey, did we mess up with any of our assumptions at the beginning? Secondly, what we have seen is people who retire, this isn't financial, but this is more emotional, is they realize they don't have that purpose. They get up in the morning and they really get depressed. And so they're looking for something to do. And so sometimes they go back to work because of that. And thirdly, if they retire and, maybe they started spending a little bit too much money, then we kind of sit down and say, hey, this really isn't what we planned on. What was the money for? If it's something you want to continue, then we need to make these kind of changes. So those are kind of some of the conversations we have with our clients.
Todd, I was recently reading this article about this study. It was conducted by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and retirees, it stated, are usually they spend more in the first 5 years of their retirement than, later on, and then it begins to decline. Has that been your experience with the clients?
Very much so. We actually encourage that just from having older parents and many clients. What we have witnessed that from, say, 60, since many people do retire at 60, to 75 are the years that if you have something on the bucket list, go do those things. Because once you reach that 75, and it doesn't have to be 70, it can be younger, but 75, one fall changes everything. And it not only changes the person who fell, but the caregiver who now the spouse who has to take care of that person. So that bucket list, changes completely. So we encourage our clients to do the things they want to do while they're still healthy enough to do it, and don't keep saying, well, I'll do it later, because all of a sudden that age catches up with you, and some clients, don't do as well.
But Todd, how many clients, though, can't let go of that fear that they're going to run out of money, that they're going to outlive their money? And so you're telling somebody who at this stage, let's assume they're not on a traditional pension that assures money to infinity per month, perhaps even with inflation adjustment, but instead they're looking at this pot of money, and they're looking at an environment where interest rates are notoriously low and have been for the last 10 plus years. And so you're telling them, though, that, look, this will be okay. Go out now and do these things, which makes complete sense.
Right.
That's the time to do it, not to say I'll do it later when you're 65 and hoping to be able to do it later. That kind of makes sense when you're 40, but not when you're 65 or 70. But I would imagine, thinking of some of the older people that I know, including in my family, I could imagine there would be some resistance to spending the money more heavily during that first 5-year period that you described. Do you run into that a lot?
Oh my gosh, Joe, almost every single one of them, especially, that generation, which is our generation, they were savers, and they worked their whole lives, and their whole thing was save money, save money, save money. And it's so hard to switch that mindset of saving money to spending the money that you save so you could spend it in retirement. And that is the coaching that we really have to focus on to help them feel comfortable with that. And that's why we try to do that comprehensive financial plan every 1 or 2 years once they retire, so they can see it on paper saying, okay, that first year, it didn't really phase my portfolio very much. I feel a little more comfortable, and then the next year, and the next year, and the next year. But almost every one of them.
I would imagine some of your clients might be reluctant to do that because of the pandemic, to splurge in the first year or 5 years or whatever. Do you get that because of the pandemic?
Well, you would think, I agree with that, but the problem is there's nothing they can spend it on. So really a lot of our clients have saved money because they haven't been able to go out and eat, and they haven't been able to take the trips that they wanted to take. But boy, I tell you, once somebody says go and lets them out of their basements, I think that you're going to see these people, make up for time lost.
You're going to see a bunch of cruise ships full of people waving their caps in the air.
I was just thinking that.
I know.
But I really think this is an important subject. And it's manifested not just in people being unwilling to go do those things they dreamt about as young men and women because of fear of running out of money, but also the people who continue to work. And I'm thinking of a good friend of mine right now who he's in his early 70s, and he doesn't – it'd be one thing if he loved his job. That'd be different. But I think that he would readily concede that he doesn't love the job. But he does worry about running out of money. And he's thinking, my wife and I are going to do these things, but let me work another year. Let me work another year. And so I've been hearing that, and now he's in his early 70s. And I hope that he's going to retire here in the next year or two, but I see his health declining, not in a way that would prohibit his taking a trip right now, but there's no question that he's less able to enjoy things such as travel today than he was 10 years ago. So I think it's another reflection of that same mentality that we're talking about when we say people have this specific amount of money and they're so fearful that it isn't going to go long enough. Mm-hmm. It's not going to carry them to their death. And I would feel that a financial planner would have to push back against that regularly. Do you also see it in the form on the subject of retirement, I guess is my question?
Same thing. So many people, like you just said, they keep going that extra year thinking next year is going to be that time, especially when they're unhappy. But it's just hard for people to give up that income stream. And that's where we come in to kind of show them that, hey, it is able to do that, and then hold their hand while they're going through it so they feel comfortable once they make that decision.
Yeah, and almost another way to pitch that, I'm thinking of ways in which I might think about that if I were in a similar situation, is, why not say, okay, go ahead and do your vacationing right now, retire, do the things that you want to do, and then once you've done that in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, then decide that, okay, I'll get a part-time job then doing something I enjoy. Not something that's laborious, but pick out of this vast range of part-time positions, everything from a museum curator or a tour guide to these historic homes, which are things I've seen. I've often said to my wife, I said, that'd be a lot of fun. For example, to work at a monument where you get to talk about a World War II history, World War I history. My point is that if you could persuade people to go ahead and take this time now for those things they've dreamt about since they were young men and women that they can do as husband and wife, which remember, that's another component of uncertainty. There may not be a team of two, this partnership that dreamt for 30, 40 years of this time when they're going to do these things. It could be the other half of the partnership that's a problem. So my point is, a lot of things can go wrong as you age, and to seize the opportunity. And I know that that's the message that you try to deliver, and I just suspect that you get some pushback.
A lot. And what I've found, the higher income earners don't have hobbies as much, at least in my experience with the clients. Some of the lower income, they might be RV travelers, and where they had more of a 9-to-5 kind of job. But the higher income earners, their work was their hobby. So those are the ones really don't know what they're going to do when they retire too. So
that's a very good point.
Yeah,
100%, Joe.
Yeah, I'm thinking of people around me too who they would come home in the evening and they would just sit and read the financial news, and that
was their entertainment.
They're either at work or they're at home thinking about money. And it is a problem when suddenly the music stops from a career standpoint and you're supposed to go and do something else. There's no something else for them to be freed to do.
Well, I'm glad you're bringing that up, Joe. I think that's good for people to hear that, though. Because it is okay. No one gets out of this life alive, and if you take and your money doesn't go with you. So
True.
Why don't we take a quick break, and then let's come back. And I want to talk a little bit about what people's perspectives are and what your advice is regarding giving to their churches, in many cases other charities. But how do people plan for their charitable giving often as they age with this finite pot of money? Back in a moment. This is Elder Talk.
You're listening to Elder Talk with TuckerAllen, providing intelligent answers for those thinking about their future. Sponsored by TuckerAllen, your estate and elder law advisors. And now, Attorney-CPA Joe Cordell.
Okay, we're back. Jill, reintroduce our guest.
We have Todd Oetken joining us today. He's a financial advisor and certified financial planner with R.W. Baird.
So before we went into the break, we wanted to talk a little bit about how people's, I want to call them spiritual goals. I know that the phrase that's used in the industry is charitable goals, but I think many people that you serve, particularly in the South, and I know that you're based out of Louisville, but your clients are many of them are Southerners. I know that many have these spiritual objectives as well, that they want to give some portion of their wealth to often a church, be a synagogue, whatever. But how do you approach that with them, and how do they deal with the fact that on the one hand they need this finite amount of money? We'll assume these are not rich people, that they know that they're going to have needs for the balance of their life, and yet at the same time they have these goals that they want to achieve regarding their giving. How do you coordinate that in planning?
that's a great point. Some people are so adamant about their tithing that it's very hard for them to back off when they probably should back off. And then there are other people who feel that, while they were working, they were able to be a little more generous. And when they started, to retire, they were able to back off from that. So a couple things. Number one, if you have a big income before you retire, and you know that you want to continue that same gifting strategy going forward, it's tax efficient to make a big donation to what they call a donor advised fund or some type of foundation in those years that you have the big income. And then you put it in this big pot. And that way you get the tax deduction in those couple of years that you have the bigger income. Then when you retire, that pot is where you take your money out of in order to do your donation. So you're not taking out of the money that you already set aside to live on. You're taking it out of something you've already prepared. And you don't get the same tax deductions because you've already gotten it, but that's where that money kind of comes from going forward in retirement. Now, you can't fully fund that. Most people can't fully fund that, but it's a great way to kind of get started.
So you're donating all in one lump sum, correct?
Yes, 1 or 2, 3 years, because you can only deduct 50% of your adjusted gross income. So it might take you 2, 3, 4 years in order to get enough in there. But that's where you get the biggest tax deduction when you do it that way.
And I guess another way to approach it is kind of the opposite approach, is to figure, okay, I'm going to live somewhat frugally. I'm going to at least live reasonably. And then whatever's left, I'm going to leave a substantial portion of that to my church. So that way, to the extent they need it to live on, the vicissitudes of the market and whatnot, they have it. But at the same time, they end up giving a substantial part to their, I'd say more often their church or synagogue than another charity. Is that what you see?
I agree with that 100%. Yes. Now, the only thing that the challenge a lot of times with any type of big gift is people think when they pass the hat on Sunday, they want people to see them putting money in there. So it kind of comes back to bite them sometimes, because now all of a sudden they've made this big donation thinking that's going to be it for the next 4 or 5 years, but then they feel guilty and they keep putting a little bit more in there. So you have to be careful with that.
Let's talk about another expense that a lot of people think about in their retirement years. And in this case, it's something less voluntary. I've ran into a lot of people who at some point in their career, in their working lives, they bought a timeshare. And suddenly they found out that they had this sort of monkey on their back where they can't get out of these. And I haven't been involved with this as an attorney, and so I haven't read the contracts. I've never owned one. But I certainly know that there are a lot of people out there who've invested in timeshares.
I'm one of them.
Really?
Yes, years ago.
So tell me how this happened.
A couple of my friends bought into a timeshare. I later joined them, and we can't get rid of it.
Did it start with a free vacation? Meaning you go visit and we'll show it to you?
Yes.
Okay. And
with my friends, not with me.
Okay.
I later joined in. But now you can't get rid of those, and there's all these scams out there. They'll take it off your hands, but it turns out to be really a scam.
And a lot of older people are in this situation.
Yes.
I don't know if they're in this situation because they bought when they were younger, or is it that they were lured to visit for this free weekend and they bought it perhaps when they're in their 70s? Todd, do you see this a lot?
Let me tell you, this just drives me completely nuts, and my face is red because I get so upset. I just met with a lady yesterday. Ironically, we're talking about this, who had two smaller timeshares. You know, they get invited to this party where they're going to get a cruise if they go. And she's 82 years old, or maybe I think she's 76 years old. She goes down there, she does the dinner. Next thing you know, they talk her into adding $111,000 to buy 500,000 points per year.
Wow.
And they're charging her 15.9% interest on this loan, which is a 15-year loan. She pays $1,600, $1,631.86 a month. And if she pays it to fruition, which she'll be 90 years old, she would have paid $235,000 for all these points, where she can't even physically go on that many trips.
So what did she have to pay on the front end?
$111,000. Well, a little bit more than that, because she's been paying on it a year and a half, I think. So
I mean, but so the down payment was that?
That was what she had to pay to get in. Oh, at the very beginning, I don't know what she paid, but this is in addition to what she had paid years ago to get these extra points. So $120,000, I would say, was probably the initial investment.
Man, that is shocking.
Wow. It's just criminal.
It really
and it
is.
has upset me to no end. I don't know what you do with 500,000 points. I know that she's going to use it, and our recommendation, since you can't get out of it, was to go ahead and pay it off and don't have them carry it. I mean, you could put a mortgage on your home better than you can pay 15% interest on carrying this note that they have.
And they make those points very attractive because they say you can use them on airline tickets, rental cars, hotel rooms, not just on different condos throughout the country or all over the world, but they make it very attractive. So it does appear like a good deal at the time if you're traveling a lot.
Yeah, at 76, I mean, you think maybe 5 more years if she stays healthy, she might be able to use it. But after that,
yeah.
And she doesn't have any kids.
How do you get rid of these timeshares?
Well, if you ever figure that out, we wouldn't be doing this radio show.
Yeah.
Well, and there are a lot of companies whose specialty is that. And among the things they look for in the contract is some misrepresentation, which you would think wouldn't be hard to find. But it is contingent on there being some failure on the part of the person who's marketing it to adequately disclose or inform the person who's buying it what they're getting. So that opportunity or that failure is not technically always there from a legal standpoint. So it's not uncommon if you respond to these marketing companies who say, let us know and we'll get you out of your timeshare. If you follow up with them, and I've talked to people who have, and they say, well, they couldn't help me because there weren't those necessary elements in the deal to where I can do that. So you could literally have this thing hanging over your head. It goes into your estate, and then your estate has to try to disavow it, whoever the personal representative is, depending on if there's anything owed at that state. Because remember what probate's for. Probate is for one purpose, of course, is to figure out who's to get your stuff, right? According to your will, is your will genuine and all that. But the other function of probate is to figure out who your creditors are and pay them off. So unless that's successfully challenged by the personal representative, that could eat up a chunk of your estate in probate as a legitimate creditor. So timeshares really are a bane for people who, especially the unsophisticated. I mean, people who've been around the block a lot may know that, but people who don't have financial backgrounds,
right,
who don't have knowledge about this, they're very vulnerable.
And another thing I want to point out about these timeshare companies, my in-laws actually owned one, and when they passed away, the timeshare company tried to tell my husband that he now owns it, which he did not.
Yeah, you can't force an heir to have the ball and chain that the person who deceased had. So that's not true, but I've heard of such tactics as that, where they go to the person who inherits the estate and they say, now you owe for the indefinite future this $250 a month or $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's a terrible thing, and I know that without question, I'm sure if you did a study, there are more people above 60 who have these than say between 60 and 40. So I do think it's something that they especially target those who wouldn't know.
Right.
And the challenge has been that those maintenance fees continue to go up. And so what was affordable before now becomes unaffordable. And before the internet, maybe you were getting a pretty good deal, but today you can go online and probably get that same room for less money just by booking it online. So it's been a challenge, and I just wanted to share that with you guys because it is very upsetting that people are taking advantage of like that.
We ought to do a show on this, or at least we ought to set aside a larger portion of the show to talk about this and have somebody on from the industry.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, though, Jill, do you use this timeshare?
Well, fortunately, one of my friends took over the timeshare. So myself and the other friend are not financially responsible for it anymore. But at first, yes, we were. We were using it, traveling every year. But then as time went on, no. And we realized, okay, this was a bad investment. We can't sell it. We can't do anything with it.
Yeah, it does. It becomes obligatory. And you feel like since you're paying for it, you feel like, gee, this is where we got to go for a vacation. So even if originally it was a great place, it becomes an obligation as long as you're paying for it that, gee, I've got to go use this. And so I think a number of people use it for that purpose.
And we didn't pay, I want to point out, we didn't pay anywhere close to what Todd was mentioning, $100,000, $200,000 for this at all.
Yeah. Yeah, it depends on, they're color-coded, the weeks. And if you have prime weeks, like, is it red weeks that are prime? But there's red, black, white weeks, and depending on what portion of the year you buy, that determines how much you pay. So if you buy off-season weeks, then it costs you less. But
Well, most of them I've seen are between $10,000 and maybe $25,000, not this $120,000. Yeah.
Well, anyway, we could talk more about that. Boy, time has flown. Are we out of time? Yep. Okay, got to wrap up. Todd, you're a marvelous guest. We look forward to your agreeing to come on in the future.
Always enjoy it. You guys call me anytime.
We will do that. Take care.
One last note for our loyal Elder Talk listeners. Our show is evolving to an online presence. At the end of September, we're moving off the radio dial, but you can still hear us online, as always, on iTunes, or you can listen to the show at TuckerAllen.com and JoeCordell.com.
This has been another episode of Elder Talk. Till next week, take care.
You've been listening to Elder Talk with TuckerAllen, providing intelligent answers for those thinking about their future, with Attorney-CPA Joe Cordell. Sponsored by TuckerAllen, your estate and elder law advisors. For more information, visit TuckerAllen.com. Listen again next Saturday for another edition of Elder Talk with TuckerAllen. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely on advertisements.